Hey, this is George. Have you ever heard of Anchor.fm? It's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. Number one, it's free. Number two, there are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so you can hear it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Check out Anchor.fm on the iOS and Android systems.
Need psychotherapy online or in person? Check out tinyurl.com/THT psychotherapy. The George Brassey podcast is made possible with funding provided from Brassey Global Strategies, LLC, a leading political consulting, public policy, government affairs, and research firm. Are you interested in running for elected office? Need advice? Call or email George, 708-769-5015. Brassey Global Strategies 1@gmail.com.
Snowstorm forces Chicago Heights to close City Hall. Snowstorm forces Chicago Heights to close City Hall, Chicago Heights, Illinois. Snow was on everybody's mind at Wednesday night's Chicago Heights City Council meeting. The Chicago area was hit by a major snowstorm, and Chicago Heights had about 10 inches of snow dumped on it Tuesday and Wednesday. City Hall was closed Wednesday afternoon because of the winter storm, and garbage pickup on Wednesday and Thursday was also postponed. And students at Chicago Heights School District 163 went to remote learning Wednesday because of the storm. The mayor's chief of staff, Karen Zaranti, thanked city workers for their efforts. She told the council that city workers had been working round the clock to keep city streets open and safe, and would continue to do so throughout the duration of the storm. Fifth Ward Alderman George Brassey also lauded city workers, saying, "The snowstorm we have experienced in recent days has been terrible, but the City of Chicago Heights Public Works Department has done an excellent job in maintaining the roads during the snowstorm. Each and every resident's request that was submitted to my office was addressed in a quick and efficient fashion." Christopher Bykoskas, 4th Ward Alderman, added that Public Works is working diligently, doing a great job cleaning up the streets. In other business, Zaranti said that the city would be hosting its second Illinois Department of Public Health clinic offering vaccinations and booster shots 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Saturday, February 12 at City Hall. The council also approved an ordinance renewing the city's employee health insurance policy and premium. The city expects to see premiums remain roughly the same. The city's benefits and insurance consultant told the council that he was able to negotiate lower rates with its insurer, Blue Cross/Blue Shield PPO, despite higher prescription drug usage by the 231 employees covered under the policy. Snowstorm forces Chicago Heights to close City Hall.
Before we get to the interview, I just want to tell you about our newest sponsor, Union Signs and Printing. Union Signs and Printing is a union sign shop located near Chicago, Illinois, that specializes in the production of corrugated plastic lawn signs used in applications ranging from political and election usages to unions, schools, and businesses. They also produce a vast array of other products, including American-made, union-printed t-shirts, banners, bio cards, literature, door hangers, business cards, and trifold. Get a hold of Union Signs and Printing at 815-740-1688 or find them on the internet at unionsignsandprinting.com. And don't forget to tell them you heard about their services on the George Brassey podcast. So glad to welcome to the podcast Steve Tortorello. Steve is the principal of Marian Catholic High School, but he's also the brains behind Warrior Wrestling. Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, George. It's great to be here. I don't know if I'd call myself the brains, but I'm definitely behind the production.
most people listening to this are probably not wrestling fans, but I am a major one. But I always hear the money mark behind.
Yes, that is maybe a little bit more accurate.
Steve, tell the audience a little bit about your journey in starting Warrior Wrestling. This is not necessarily part of your job duties as principal of Marian Catholic.
No, this was not listed when I was brought on board running the wrestling organization. Actually, it began outside of school. So I, a longtime wrestling fan like yourself, and for decades and decades, absolutely loved it. And I've always in my life as well also done quite a bit of show production and performance. So in high school and college, I was in improv and sketch comedy groups. In college, I was part of the group that booked and ran all of the major speakers and concerts and things like that. And actually, for about a decade, from 04, 05 until 2014, before I became principal at Marian, I owned and ran a sketch and improv comedy company. So I've always loved, on the side, in addition to education, which is my main passion and mission in life, I've loved performing and putting on shows. And I was in a bit of a drought for many years after we had closed up the comedy group. And I was thinking, gosh, I really want to get back into making things, into working with my friends and putting on shows for people. And I thought, what if we got into independent wrestling? And I go to a lot of independent wrestling shows around the Midwest. I love them. I was like, we could put something like this on. And originally, my plan was to do it completely separate from the school. So never the two shall meet. They'll just be completely different things. And it was my buddy Eric, one of my best friends who helps run Warrior with me, who said, why don't you do it at the school? You're not really that interested in making money. You want to do something. Why don't you do it at the school? The money that you make, you donate back to the school. The school has the facilities. The school has all of the resources. And so I pitched it to my boss, the president of Marian, Vince Kredinsky, in December of 17. And Vince is always up for new or interesting ideas, and he gave us the green light. And in May of 2018, we hosted our first wrestling show at Marian.
Wow. It seems like just yesterday it was the first wrestling show at Marian. I remember I was there. The headline match was Alberto Del Rio versus Jack Swagger, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tell the a little bit about the evolution. How many events has there been since that first one in 2018?
Great question. So we have done 12 total. The one coming up this June will be our 13th. And essentially, we've fallen into a pattern of we do about 4 per year, roughly 1 a quarter. And, it has, as you said, it has definitely evolved over the years. So even just from a structural standpoint, the first 5 were all Marian activities. So it was run through Marian itself, hosted at Marian, all the money went to Marian. After the 5th one, we switched it up and created a separate LLC, essentially to protect Marian from liability as far as if anybody ever got hurt and or if a show ever lost money, the school wouldn't lose money. So we kind of split it off and created a separate LLC. And now the LLC runs the show and then donates the money afterwards back to Marian. So the structure has evolved, but also the nature of what we do has evolved. Obviously, last year in the pandemic, we were not packing 750 people inside of the gym at Marian to have a show. So what we did is we moved outside and we took an idea that had been bubbling for a couple of years to take the inside action and go put it out on the football field. And the pandemic kind of forced us to have to do that. And what's interesting is so many fans and families actually prefer being outside, being under the stars, being under the lights, such that we're doing it again this summer. And even post-pandemic, we will likely do 1 or 2 of the shows each year outside. So there's that forced evolution. Necessity is the mother of innovation.
Steve, tell the audience, Warrior Wrestling's YouTube channel has been counting down the top matches of all time. What is your all-time Warrior Wrestling?
My favorite Warrior Wrestling match. This is a little bit of a spoiler, but I'll be willing to give it away. And I did not control the countdown. The countdown was truly voted on by fans, wrestlers, staff, referees, everybody. But my favorite is also the one that ends up as number 1. And I don't think it'll be a surprise to anybody. It is the December 2019 match between the Rascals, Trey Miguel, Desmond Xavier, and Zachary Wentz, and the group called Chaos from New Japan. Rocky Romero, Amazing Red, and Will Ospreay, whom I believe to be arguably the greatest wrestler in the world. And Ospreay came all the way from Tokyo, Japan for that match. And it was really 6 of the most innovative performers in their field. And again, if you're not a wrestling fan, those names and these terms might not strike you, but think about any field. Think about classical music, think about ballet. If you bring 6 of the best together who normally don't perform together, and you ask them to raise the bar, that is what these 6 wrestlers did in that match. So because of how incredible the match was and because of what it represented, so many incredible people coming together, that's my personal favorite Warrior Wrestling match.
Steve, you were at WrestleMania 37. Tell the audience what that experience was like. Was this your first WrestleMania? Was this a trip for you? And this was the first time pro wrestling had a crowd in a long time. What was that?
So I've been to a handful of them. My first WrestleMania was when it was in Chicago. And for those, again, who might not be wrestling fans, WrestleMania is a once-a-year event. I have non-wrestling fans say to me all the time, "Oh, is there a WrestleMania this week?" And they refer to it as any wrestling event. WrestleMania is like the Super Bowl. It is WWE's biggest event of the year. And so I was at a handful of them. I've been to ones in Chicago, Detroit, New Jersey, Phoenix, and Orlando in the past. But I hadn't been to one in 8 or 9 years. And as you said, WWE hasn't had fans since the pandemic began. But the event was incredible a couple of weeks ago. They ran in Raymond James Stadium, which is where the Super Bowl was. And the stadium holds about 75,000 people, and they limited it to 25,000 people. So there was social distancing was in effect. Our seats, there was nobody in front of us, nobody behind us, nobody directly to our left or right. Everybody was in their own little pod. Masks were required. They had a full symptom screening on an app you had to complete before going in, temperature checks at the door. They did basically what we did on the football field at a small scale last year. They did on the grand WWE scale. It was incredibly safe, incredibly well done. And I will just say it was thrilling to be back with a live audience again. WWE is the industry leader as far as production and entertainment value. So the fireworks show, the incredible set, the set of the show or the stage where the wrestlers walk out was a pirate ship as tall as the entire stadium. Those types of things. And I not only do I love wrestling, I love live sports, I love concerts, and I haven't been to them in a year and several months. So being part of that was really just electric. It was an incredible experience. And you could tell, even from being lined up with people outside of the football stadium, everyone was just buzzing. Everyone was just so happy to be there. And so it shows that you can do it safely. If you take the right precautions and you do everything you need to, you can do it safely and you can have those experiences again.
Steve, you're a principal at a high school. Me and you are probably around the same cohort in our mid-50s.
Mm-hmm.
We grew up in the kind of a golden age of professional, the 80s to the 90s to the 2000s. Is there an interest among the student population in pro wrestling these days? And what do the students think of Warrior Wrestling?
Great question. It is very minimal. There are maybe a handful of kids at the school who are wrestling fans. Wrestling is just not cool right now with the teens and 20-somethings. Whereas, as you said, when you and I were 10 to 15, 10 to 16, in the late 90s, Stone Cold Steve Austin and the NWO and every guy in my 7th grade through junior year of high school classes knew everything about every faction. A lot of the girls did too. Not the case anymore. So we have a handful of kids that are very interested. And those kids, I always welcome to be volunteers and to help out. We've had some of those kids working camera crew. We've had some of those kids helping backstage with the wrestlers. If they're interested, we say, come on down to the show. We'll help you meet these people, see what the show looks like, work on it backstage. But the vast majority of the kids, nope, they don't even have any idea. It's just something that happens over the weekend with the school, which, there's so many different events and goings on at the school campus that the kids are none the wiser to. So I would say out of, the student body, 95% of them don't even know it exists.
Oh, that makes me so sad.
Same here.
Some of the great memories, but I guess it seems like the product that's being out there it maybe not be as enjoyable as grew up. And now we sound like two old guys talking about glory days.
Well, and also so much has changed too, in that when we watched wrestling in 98, 99, there was no smartphones. the internet was a fledgling little thing that had AOL and some websites on it. So if you wanted something different, something that wasn't the sitcoms that your parents were watching or 2020 or Dateline, you went to cable and here was this exciting live thing called wrestling. So I think a lot of people got drawn in just because it was this alternative. And nowadays, there's a million forms of entertainment for every particular niche of interest. So I think a lot of it is just that no one is stumbling upon wrestling. Like many people stumbled upon it in the late 90s and fell in love with it. Nowadays, you don't really stumble upon much. You know what you like, and you can go find a channel, a website, a YouTube stream, or something for the thing that you like, and then that's it.
And another big thing is when you think about there's the WWE Network, there's Impact Plus. I think most of the promotions are working on getting their own streaming source. Back in the day, you literally had to wait till 7 p.m. on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just, you can get it whenever you want. I think that's a big, big difference from our generation to the current crop.
Yeah, and that's great for diehard fans because a diehard fan can watch a match from 30 years ago at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday if they want. But it takes away, so it's like everything, it's a positive and a negative. The positive is it's all at your fingertips. The negative is it's not appointment TV anymore. And that's true of most TV. It used to be that Monday night at 7 o'clock was a special time. You didn't see any of the stars outside of that time. So it made the time that you spend together special watching the show. And I think now that has transitioned to the live events are incredibly special. That's why I love doing wrestling live events. And that's why I encourage anybody who, even if you're not a wrestling fan, go to a live event. I'm a big fan of a lot of things, but I tell everybody that wrestling and hockey are special live. There's just something different. There's something in the air. And so, yes, wrestling has changed with the technology and the on-demand nature of it, but nothing replaces the live event. So if anybody listening is questionable or they're not sure about wrestling, go see wrestling live. And then you might not come out as impassioned as George and I are, but I think you will respect it and like it.
Steve, you were so impassioned. You wrote one of your theses on professional wrestling. Tell the audience a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was an American Studies major at the University of Notre Dame, and I did an optional honors thesis project. And I remember meeting with my advisor and saying, well, there's one of two things I want to write about, either Bruce Springsteen or pro wrestling. And he chuckled and he said, well, everybody writes about Springsteen. He said, let's see what you have to say about wrestling. And so my major was like American history, politics, culture, literature, etc. And so I wrote a paper about the history of pro wrestling from World War II to the present, and basically analyzed the way that wrestling mimicked cultural trends. So coming out of World War II in the 40s and 50s, you saw a lot of all-American hero archetypal good guys and foreigner bad guys who were purportedly, Nazis or Japanese generals, etc. And throughout the decades, you see what the stories are in wrestling and how they are mirroring the cultural moment that you're in. So, for example, we were talking about the late 90s a few minutes ago. The big anti-heroes of the late 90s were the NWO, Degeneration X, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and they were fighting against the company. And the NWO was fighting WCW itself. Austin was fighting against McMahon. Well, this mimicked what we saw in larger culture, whether that be in movies, books, etc. This was the era of Fight Club. This was the era of Jerry Springer. This was the era of Mike Tyson. So wrestling was not unique in that culturally there was a moment of pushing back against the norm. This is the era of Office Space. So very much like the 1950s, the 90s were a time of mainstream affluence and growth, and then conformity. And then there was a group that pushed back. The artists pushed back against that. Wrestling did it just like movies and film and TV did it, and books. So that was generally the take of my thesis, that wrestling mirrors the greater cultural moment, the zeitgeist of what's going on. And that if you look at wrestling at any time, you can see what's happening in the larger culture. So that was my thesis. Everybody loved it. It won a couple of awards. And I was just giddy that I got to spend so much time researching and writing stuff on wrestling.
I often tell a lot of my colleagues in politics that professional wrestling definitely prepared me greatly for the career of elected office. So it definitely does mirror the zeitgeist in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and even, not getting into individual politicians or things like that too much, but former President Trump, who had been a WWE performer at a variety of times, whether people love or hate former President Trump, there is a lot of what he did that is directly tied to things that he did in wrestling, because wrestling is about crowds. Wrestling is about understanding what's happening in the buzz in the air and being able to say certain things. So you see a lot of politicians who are very good at working with crowds and sensing that moment. The skills that they use are very similar to the skills that a wrestler would use. And so, yeah, it is very, very much two sides of the same coin.
When you see somebody on C-SPAN, a member of the House of Representatives, going on and on, I always like to think, oh, he's out there cutting a promo.
Yep, exactly.
Steve, what are some matches you're looking forward to this summer for Warrior Wrestling?
Well, we have got, and I will drop an exclusive. We're not going to tell the world this for a couple more days. The main event of the June show is going to be an 8-person match, a match we call a War of Attrition match. And it will be to crown our first ever Warrior Wrestling Lucha Libre champion. Lucha Libre, for those who don't know, is traditional Mexican professional wrestling. Now, after college, I spent a couple of years living and teaching in East LA, in East Los Angeles. And I was just blown away by the welcome of so many of the kids at the school where I was. That they did was they took me to genuine, authentic Lucha Libre in East LA. I got to go see Lucha Libre is the very ornate masks and the flyers and the costumes and things like that. And I fell in love with Lucha. And so when we started Warrior Wrestling, we very specifically said, we want Lucha Libre to be a part of it. We think it's important. We love what it is. So in our first 8 shows, we had luchadors from Mexico come to Marian Catholic in Chicago Heights as part of our performances. Well, last year during the pandemic, travel wasn't a possibility. So in our 4 pandemic shows, there were no Mexican luchadors on the show. And now that travel has eased up and people are getting vaccinated and things are generally a little bit more doable as we have better safety, et cetera, we can welcome travelers in from Mexico again. So we are thrilled to have 8 luchadors who will be competing for our first Lucha Libre championship. And Lucha is the style of wrestling where if you're not a wrestling fan, go watch Lucha Libre. You might not be impressed by technical wrestling. You might be a little bit off-put by brawling or hardcore fighting wrestling. But Lucha Libre is just beautiful athleticism and performance. And so our main event this June has an 8-person Lucha Libre match that I think is going to blow everybody away. So that is the match right now that I am just counting down the days till we get to share that with all the fans.
Steven, I'm very happy, to have Warrior Wrestling and to have Marian Catholic located in my district. I'm very happy to announce that I'm going to give you guys a donation of 3 replica championship belts to raffle off at all 3 shows, and you guys can keep all the proceeds.
George, I appreciate that greatly. For those who don't know, we do these start where folks can meet the wrestlers, get autographs, take pictures, et cetera. And at these fan fests, we're going to raffle off those belts and make a big announcement during each show. And all the money goes back to the school, obviously. And we're really, really excited to do this. So thank you so much for the donation. I think it's going to be exciting. And I think it'll just add one more sprinkle on top of the cake of what these shows are going to be.
Absolutely. I'm glad to do it. Steve, the last question I always ask my guests are, what are 2 books that you would recommend to the audience that have been important or influential to you as a person?
That is a fantastic question. I'm going to do 1 fiction and 1 nonfiction. I'll start with the nonfiction. There's a book called Switch by Dan and Chip Heath, the Heath brothers. And it's all about behavior. I read it in, 2009, 2008. And I just pulled it off the shelf at a library. I saw it when I was at the local library. This was in LA. I saw it at the library. I checked it out and read it. And it was just all about how we can direct our own behaviors and how in any group setting or leadership setting, we can help direct the behaviors of others using really simple ways of thinking about things. And it's just really helpful and practical. So the book is called Switch by Dan and Chip Heath. And as far as a fictional book, I would recommend, this might sound cliched, it's an oldie but a goodie, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. is my favorite novel of all time because I believe it is so sincere. Mark Twain is one of my favorite Americans. He for those obviously who know him as an author, he was a humorist, he was a comedian, he was a speaker, he was just this genuine person with a really witty and honest take on life. And he has some really, really, really funny books. But The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is a deeply honest, it's funny in parts, but it's a deeply honest look at America and what America does right and wrong. And the protagonist, for those who might not know, because people might know who the character is, but might not know the story, Huck Finn helps Jim, who is a slave, escape. And they travel down the Mississippi River. And Huck has been conditioned his entire life by the racist society in which he lives in Missouri that he is committing a grave sin by helping Jim escape. But Huck believes that it is the right thing to do because this man is obviously being tortured, being held, etc. And so Huck decides that if by doing the right thing that means I have to suffer and die in hell, well then all right, then I'll go to hell. And it's just this beautiful, moving story of how a 14-year-old kid can get it right when at the time the country was getting it so wrong. And so I would recommend Switch by Dan and Chip Heath, and I would recommend the original, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain.
Steve, where can the audience learn more about the events at Warrior Wrestling on the internet?
Our website is warriorwrestling.net. We are also on all major social media platforms at Warrior Wrestling with no vowels in wrestling. So it's Warrior and then WRSTLNG. That's Twitter and Instagram. We have a page on Facebook as well. We post all of the information about the shows, merchandise, other things like that in all of those locations. So please follow us, check out the website. And again, if you're listening and you're not a wrestling fan, give it a chance. Saturday, June 5th, we are right here in Chicago Heights at Marian Catholic on the football field, under the lights, under the stars. Kids are free. Kids 16 and under are free. And so adult tickets start at $30. It's BYO everything. So the field seats, which are $45, bring your own lawn chairs, blanket, food, etc. Make it a picnic night. The kids are free. Come on out, enjoy the evening, and I promise you, you will walk away blown away by all of the majesty that is professional wrestling.
I can totally agree with it, and I can't wait to attend myself. Steve, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, George. It's a pleasure to be here.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Help George stay on the Chicago Heights City Council. Go and donate today at tinyurl.com/AldermanGeorge 2023. Need more George? Like his pages on Facebook. Friends of George Brassey PAC, Fifth Ward Business Alliance, Chicago Heights Bicycle and Pedestrian Resource Center, and the George Brassey Podcast.